There's a particular kind of mental torture that happens when your mind decides to become a broken record. Playing the same awkward conversation, embarrassing moment, or conflict on endless repeat until you know every word, every tone, every facial expression by heart. What most people don't understand about this social rumination is that it's not actually about the conversation itself. It's about what your mind believes that interaction revealed about your worth, your competence, or your place in the social world. Your brain isn't replaying the moment because it was objectively significant. It's replaying it because some part of you interpreted it as evidence of rejection, inadequacy, or social failure. The mental loop isn't trying to torture you. It's desperately trying to solve what it perceives as a threat to your belonging and acceptance. This replay mechanism often activates after interactions where you felt exposed, misunderstood, or like you didn't represent yourself authentically. Maybe you stumbled over words during an important presentation, said something that landed wrong in a group conversation, or had a conflict where you didn't respond the way you wish you had. Your mind, designed to help you navigate social relationships successfully, treats these moments as data that needs intensive analysis to prevent future social disasters. The rumination intensifies because your brain operates under the illusion that if it just reviews the interaction enough times, it will discover the perfect thing you should have said or done differently. It believes that through mental rehearsal and analysis, it can retroactively fix what happened, or at least prepare you to handle similar situations flawlessly in the future. But this mental detective work never actually reaches a satisfying conclusion because you're trying to solve the past with present moment thinking, attempting to control something that's already complete. The hidden cost of chronic social rumination extends far beyond just feeling mentally exhausted by repetitive thoughts. When you continuously replay interactions looking for evidence of how you failed socially, you're training your brain to scan for rejection, criticism, and inadequacy in every social situation. You become hypervigilant about others' responses, interpreting neutral facial expressions as disapproval, reading hidden meanings into casual comments, and approaching new interactions with defensive anxiety about how you might mess up again. This mental pattern also disconnects you from authentic self-expression because you're constantly monitoring and editing yourself based on fears generated by previous interactions. You might hold back from sharing genuine thoughts or feelings because your replaying mind has convinced you that authenticity leads to embarrassment. You develop an internal editor that's so focused on preventing future awkward moments that it prevents you from being spontaneous, vulnerable, or real in your connections with others. Living with this social replay loop also affects your ability to learn genuinely useful lessons from interpersonal experiences. When your mind is obsessively focused on what you did wrong, you miss opportunities to notice what went well, what you handled skillfully, or what the interaction taught you about boundaries, values, or compatibility with different people. The rumination keeps you stuck in shame, rather than allowing natural integration of social learning. There's a profound insight that transforms how you relate to awkward social moments. Other people are not thinking about your interaction nearly as much as you are. While you're replaying every detail of that conversation for the 100th time, the other person has likely moved on completely, engaged with dozens of other interactions and experiences that have naturally pushed your exchange into the background of their awareness. This isn't because people don't care about you. It's because human brains are naturally designed to move forward, to focus on current concerns rather than endlessly analyzing past conversations. The intensity with which you're reviewing the interaction is not matched by equal intensity on their part. Your mind has created a spotlight effect where you believe others are paying as much attention to your perceived failures as you are. But this simply isn't how human psychology works. Understanding this disparity helps you recognize that the social catastrophe your mind has created around the interaction exists primarily in your own mental space. The awkwardness, embarrassment, or conflict that feels so significant to you has likely already faded from the other person's active awareness, replaced by their own concerns, conversations, and daily experiences. Begin by catching yourself in the act of social rumination and recognizing it as a mental habit rather than productive problem solving. When you notice your mind starting the familiar replay, pause and ask yourself, what is my brain trying to accomplish by reviewing this again? Often, you'll discover that the rumination is attempting to protect you from future embarrassment by finding the right response you should have given. A task that's both impossible and unnecessary. Practice interrupting the replay loop by acknowledging what your mind is trying to do and gently redirecting it. You might say something like, I see that my mind is worried about how that conversation went. Thank you for trying to protect me from future awkwardness. I've learned what I can from this interaction, and now I'm choosing to focus on the present moment. This acknowledges the protective intention behind the rumination, while choosing not to engage with the endless analysis. Challenge the assumption that awkward social moments are disasters that require intensive mental processing. Most interpersonal interactions contain some degree of imperfection, misunderstanding, or awkwardness. This is normal human experience, not evidence of personal failure. Other people expect imperfection in social exchanges because they experience it in their own interactions too. What feels like a social catastrophe to you is usually just ordinary human messiness to others. Develop a more balanced perspective on the interaction by deliberately looking for what went well, what you handled appropriately, or what you learned about yourself or others. Your ruminating mind naturally focuses on perceived failures, but most interactions contain a mixture of successful and awkward moments. Training yourself to notice the full picture rather than just the parts that trigger shame helps break the cycle of one-sided mental analysis. As you begin to interrupt social rumination patterns, something shifts in how you experience interpersonal interactions. You become more present during conversations because you're not simultaneously worrying about how you'll analyze them later. Your authentic personality emerges more freely because you're not constantly editing yourself based on fears generated by previous exchanges. You develop genuine confidence that comes from accepting imperfection as part of human connection rather than something to be avoided at all costs. Future interactions become less charged with anxiety because you're not carrying the unresolved emotional weight of endlessly analyzed past conversations. You respond more naturally to what's actually happening in real time rather than through the filter of previous perceived social failures. Your social skills actually improve because you're learning from direct experience rather than from mental loops that often distort what actually occurred. You begin to develop compassion for both yourself and others in social situations, recognizing that everyone sometimes says things they wish they hadn't, misunderstands others' intentions, or feels awkward in interpersonal exchanges. This shared humanity creates connection rather than separation, understanding rather than judgment. You realize that your perceived social failures often make you more relatable and authentic rather than less worthy of connection. Most importantly, you learn to trust that most social interactions resolve themselves naturally without intensive mental intervention. People forgive, forget, and move on from awkward moments much more readily than your anxious mind believes. The relationships that matter can weather imperfect conversations, and the ones that can't probably weren't built on solid foundations anyway. The freedom that comes from releasing social rumination isn't about becoming careless or insensitive in your interactions. It's about trusting your natural social instincts, learning from experiences without obsessing over them, and recognizing that authentic connection requires the risk of imperfection. You discover that most people prefer genuine, occasionally awkward humanity to polished, carefully controlled presentations. So, if something in this message speaks to your own experience of mentally replaying social interactions until they become sources of shame rather than learning, leave a comment with the word "released." Let it be a signal that you're ready to interrupt the rumination cycle, to trust that others are more forgiving than your anxious mind believes, to accept imperfection as part of authentic human connection, and, if these words feel like permission to stop torturing yourself with endless social analysis, subscribe. There's more here for you. Not about becoming perfect in social situations, but about developing a healthier relationship with interpersonal imperfection, trusting your natural social instincts, and remembering that the connections worth having can survive the occasional awkward conversation